So now we're going to talk about demand and supply. In a market, we have demanders and we have suppliers. These two groups of people coming together create prices and quantities. First, let's define what a relative price means. This is the money price of a product expressed relative to the money price of another product. So the money price is just the price in terms of dollars. And let's say that a slice of pizza costs $3 and a hamburger costs $6. Well, to find the relative price of pizza, we would say $3 divided by $6 would give us 1/2 of a hamburger is equal to a slice of pizza. The relative price is also the opportunity cost, because if I buy a slice of pizza, I forego 1/2 of a hamburger. Let's look at a demand curve. Notice that the demand curve slopes down. Well, this downward sloping demand curve reflects the law of demand that states as price increases, quantity demanded decreases, and as price decreases, quantity demanded increases. Take these 2 points. Movement along the curve, this is equal to a change in the quantity demanded. So be careful how that's worded. A change in the quantity demanded is movement along a single demand curve. So we don't have a change in demand, which is a whole new demand curve, a shift in the demand curve. Here we just have a movement along a demand curve, which we call change in the quantity demanded. And this can only happen when the price changes from price point A to price point B. What if income increases? Well, this will shift the demand curve. So we call this a change in demand. And if income were to increase, we'd have an outward shift in our demand. So we'd actually have a whole new demand curve. And since this is because income has increased, the demand curve shifts outward because now people can buy more than they previously could at any given price. So let's talk about some factors that shift the demand curve. Well, we just talked about income. As income increases for a normal good, demand increases or shift right. So what's a normal good? A normal good is something like a vehicle or a TV, something that we think we would like more of, and as our income increase, we would buy more of them. But there's also inferior goods. Think of this as ramen noodles. As you become richer and richer, as your income increases, you're going to demand less and less of goods like ramen noodles, because ramen noodles is something you eat when you're poor. So when your income decreases, you're going to eat more and more ramen noodles because you're trying to save some money. So demand will increase in that case. Another thing that shifts the demand curve is the prices of related goods. So let's take substitutes. A substitute is something like, let's take the computer example. We have Apples and we have Dells. Well, the price of if we're talking about if our good is Apple computers and the price of a substitute, a Dell computer, increases by $1,000 or something, well, our demand for apples is going to increase. So that's why we see the price of a substitute increasing. Our demand for our good, our Apple computers, will be increasing or shifting right. Then there's also complements. This is like peanut butter and jelly. If we only ate peanut butter and jelly together on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and the price of peanut butter went up a whole bunch, well, then our demand for jelly would go down a whole bunch because we only buy those two things together, and now the price of peanut butter is increased. So think about complements and substitutes. Those are both in consumption. 3, we have our preferences, and this just makes sense. If we like something more, the demand's going to increase for it or shift to the right. If we like something less, the demand's going to decrease for it or shift to the left. We also have the number of demanders. This is another intuitive one. If the more people there are, the demand's going to shift to the right. So an increase in the number of demanders is going to shift demand to the right. A decrease in the number of demanders will shift demand to the left. There's also the ease of credit, which just means how easily we can get money, borrow money. And as the ease of credit increases, our demand's going to shift outward. That makes sense? The ease of credit decreasing will shift our demand leftward or down. Also, the last but not least is the expected future price. As the expected future price increases, our demand will increase now because we anticipate a raise in price. So if we hear that gas is expected to go up to $6 a gallon a couple months from now, well, right now we're going to try to buy as much gas as possible to compensate for that increase later. So right now our demand will increase. Let's look at the supply side of the market now. The law of supply states as prices rise, quantity supplied increases, and as price decreases, the quantity supplied decreases, which gives us this upward sloping supply curve. Just like demand, Movements along the supply curve are known as changes in the quantity supplied, while a shift in the supply curve is known as a change in supply. So there's also some factors that shift supply. Cost. As your cost increase, your supply shifts left or down. As your cost decrease, your supply shifts right or up. Technology. As technology increases, supply shifts to the right. You can do things at a cheaper rate now, let's say. As technology decreases, which is very unlikely, but if it did happen, well, supply would shift to the left. The prices of related goods. Well, this is in production now. The price of substitutes, let's say the price of a substitute increases, well, now your supply curve is going to shift to the left. As the price of a substitute decreases, your supply curve will shift to the right. And complements of production again. As the price of a complement increases, your supply will shift to the right. And as the price of a complement decreases, your supply will shift to the left. There's also the number of suppliers. The number of suppliers go up, well, of course, the supply will go up or shift to the right. And the number of suppliers decrease, likewise, the supply will shift to the left. And also the state of nature. If we think it's going to be a good year, supply is going to shift to the right. And if it's a bad year, supply is going to shift to the left. Last but not least, we have expected future prices, which we've seen before. If the expected future price increases, supply will shift to the left. As it decreases, supply will shift to the right. Notice that the only thing that affects both demanders and suppliers was the expected future price, and it had an opposite effect on each group. So let's look at demand and supply together now. At this price, P, we have a shortage because quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. So the suppliers are only putting out 100 units, and the demanders are demanding 200 units. So we have this shortage. The demanders would like an extra 100 units out there. At this price, we have a surplus because quantity demanded is less than quantity supplied. So at this price, demanders are only demanding 100 units, suppliers are flooding the market with 200 units, so now we have this extra 100 units out there that we don't know what to do with. Only at this price, we are in equilibrium because quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. So a definition of equilibrium says this is a situation in which opposing forces balance, or a situation in which there is no automatic tendency for change. So at any price below equilibrium, there's going to be an automatic tendency for a price to increase until we reach equilibrium. Likewise, for any price above equilibrium, there'll be an automatic tendency for prices to decrease until we reach equilibrium. But when we're at equilibrium, we can expect to stay there. Suppose the technology used to produce HD televisions advances. What is the effect on the price and quantity of an HD TV? Well, let's take a look at the supply and demand. We see that an increase in technology will increase supply, which will shift that curve to the right. So as a result, we see that the price decreases and the quantity increases. Suppose people learn that there are added benefits from eating Spam. Highly unlikely, but just suppose. So how does that affect the price and quantity of Spam? Well, we should have talked about this last time, but we'll talk about it now. To solve these kind of questions, you want to go through 4 steps. The first step, to draw on a supply and demand diagram and label everything. The second step, determine which curve is affected. The third step, determine the direction of the shift. And the fourth step, draw the new curve and determine the answer. So here we have our supply and demand curves. We see that these added benefits to Spam is going to increase demand for Spam. So it's going to push the demand curve to the right. That is going to shift the price up and the quantity out to the right or up. Let's take a look at another example. It says that soda is a normal good and people's income decrease. Simultaneously, the price of the sweetener used in soda falls. What happens to the price and quantity of soda? So we want to draw our supply and demand again, but this time we notice that we have 2 shifts happening. Supply is increasing or going to the right, and demand is decreasing or going to the left because income's decreased. Well, we want to shift supply and demand by the exact same amount, unless told otherwise, to see what happens to price and quantity. In this case, it is clear that price decreases, but we don't know what happens to Q, so we just say that the change in quantity is ambiguous. Let's take another example. Suppose a large hurricane is now predicted to enter the Gulf and destroy many of the oil wells. What happens to the price and quantity of oil? Well, since this event is expected to happen in the future, let's take a look at the future diagram first. So in the future, we see supply and demand, and we know that the supply curve is going to shift to the left in the future. Well, we see that the price is expected to rise in the future. This increase in the expected future price will affect both supply and demand for oil now, in the present. So now let's take a look at this present graph. And remember that an increase in the expected future price will increase demand now, shifting the demand curve to the right, and decrease supply now, shifting the demand curve to the left. So we can draw those two shifts. Again, we want to draw those shifts equal. We see that the price of oil will definitely rise now, but it is unclear what will happen to the quantity of oil. So we can just say that the quantity change is ambiguous now.